Jamie Raskin and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez destroyed Republicans today in the House of Representatives because they're trying to rush legislation through the House that would allow for Americans to simply accuse any other person in the country of a crime, and they could be potentially sent to a detention center and then deported if they don't have the right documents. That would give any American, any Karen American, the ability to say, hey, that person over there with brown skin maybe looks Hispanic. I think they shoplifted that candy bar. Arrest them and deport them, which is utterly insane. Before, you get deported if you're convicted of a crime. If you go through due process and it turns out that you're here illegally, you're here as an undocumented person. Republicans aren't happy with that. They want to give Americans the power to get any brown person or Hispanic-looking person deported. And thank God we've got people like Jamie Raskin and AOC who are standing on the front line and informing the country of what these Republicans, these mega cult members, people like Donald Trump, are trying to do.
Sorry that Representative Collins has left. I was just presented with a tweet that he sent out about the New Jersey-born Episcopalian Bishop Marianne Budd, who performed a service as part of the inaugural ceremonies, and apparently he was not pleased with what she had to say, and he wrote, "The person giving this sermon should be added to the deportation list." And I would have asked him whether he was serious about that. Of course, the Episcopalian bishop is a U.S. citizen, but of course, that's very much in the spirit of the times. Reminds me of the period of the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798, when there was an effort to use the Alien and Sedition Acts, which have been invoked recently by the new president, in order to persecute the political opponents of the administration, as well as to chase down and kick out of the country all of the dangerous French immigrants who were spreading revolutionary propaganda in the country. And a friend of Jefferson's wrote to him, John Taylor, to say how exhausted he was by all of the political fighting and the demonizing of immigrants and the attempt to shut the borders down and to attack political opponents as enemies of the state and so on. And Jefferson wrote him this beautiful letter back. You should check it out online if you can. It's a letter to John Taylor. And in it, he counseled patience. He said, "A little patience, and the reign of witches shall pass over. Their spells dissolve, and the people, recovering their true sight, recover the true principles of their government." In the meantime, he said, we're suffering all of the horrors and indignities of the hysteria. But he said, if the game runs against us at home sometimes, as inevitably it will, then, he said, we must have patience, because this is a game where principles are at stake. Our colleagues have spoken up for nothing other than due process. The idea that the bipartisan compromise that has been cemented in law since 1996 should stand, saying that we want the immediate detention and deportation of undocumented people who actually commit crimes. And in an effort to drive a wedge in this body, they now say they want to move from people who've been convicted of crimes, which obviously accords completely with common sense, to people who've just been accused or charged with crimes, even if the charges are dropped, even for offenses as small as shoplifting. In any event, we don't claim somehow that one side or the other is morally righteous and the other is morally wrong. We're trying to have a public policy debate. And the role of public emotion in public policy debates, Mr. Speaker, is an interesting thing. Some people think it's enough to show up and say there's been a terrible event. There's been a sickening murder or rape. Therefore, you must pass our bill, without even reading the bill, without even looking to see what's in the bill. Does it make sense as a matter of public policy? If that were the standard they actually believed in, they would be voting for all of the gun safety legislation they've been rejecting, because every time there's a massacre, whether it's in Connecticut or Florida or Texas or Illinois or any of our communities, we come in and we say, we want what the American people want in public opinion polls, a universal violent criminal background check. We want a ban on military-style assault weapons. There's no reason 18-year-olds should be bearing AR-15s and showing up in classrooms and churches and synagogues with weapons of mass destruction. If it were enough just to appeal to emotion, they would be voting with us. But no, they say, well, that conflicts with their public policy understanding. Well, at the very least, you think they would have the burden of telling us what they do support. But we never hear anything. You don't hear a peep out of them about gun violence because the Second Amendment, as they misinterpret it, is sacrosanct, as well as their NRA support and contributions. That's what they bow down to, is the National Rifle Association when it comes to this policy debate, because they won't advance anything that conflicts with the NRA, even if the Supreme Court says it's perfectly fine. We had a ban on assault weapons for a decade. It was perfectly constitutional. We have the Brady Act. We have a violent criminal background check. But even though expanding it to make it universal would save hundreds or thousands of lives, American citizen lives, every year, they won't touch it. So don't invoke emotion selectively and say everybody's got to go along with what you're saying without even analyzing the policy implications and the constitutional implications. If you're not willing to put anything on the table to reduce the sickening death toll for gun violence in America, there's nothing in the world that approaches what we've got here. It's 25 times higher than the EU countries. Dozens of times higher than Japan, Canada, UK, you name it. And yet they pretend as if there's no problem. And yet they seize on an opportunistic bill like this to try to drive a wedge within our Congress and within our people. I hope they do better when we get to the second week of this new administration than freeing violent criminal felons who stormed this Capitol and attacked our police officers, and then bringing forward a bill like this to try to cover up for their complicity with that sickening violence against our constitutional order. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from California is recognized. You have 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
Jamie Raskin there, nail on the head when it comes to Republicans trying to pull at Americans' heartstrings on immigration, yet when their kids die in school shootings or at the hands of a teenager who has an assault rifle because they don't need a background check, well, no, Republicans aren't going to do anything about that. AOC. She used her 3 minutes to talk about how a lot of these Republicans who want this legislation rushed through the House of Representatives, it's interesting how they own shares of a lot of the private prison companies that would build new detention facilities in order to help everyone, help hold everyone who's accused of a crime.
Mr. Speaker, I want the American people to know with eyes wide open what is inside this bill. Because we stand here just 2 days after President Trump gave unconditional pardons to violent criminals who attacked our nation's capital on January 6th. And these are the people who want you to believe, who want us to believe that they're trying to, quote unquote, keep criminals off the streets. When they are opening the floodgates. I want the American people to know what is in this bill. Because in the guise and in the wake of tragedy, we are seeing a fundamental erosion of our civil rights. In this bill, if a person is so much as accused of a crime, if someone wants to point a finger and accuse someone of shoplifting, they will be rounded up and put into a private detention camp and sent out for deportation without a day in court, without a moment to assert their right and without a moment to assert the privilege of innocent until proven guilty. Without being found guilty of a crime, they will be rounded up. That is what is inside this bill, a fundamental suspension of a core American value. And that is why I rise to oppose it. If you're a dreamer, all someone has to do is point a finger and you will be rounded up. And we have seen moments like these happen before. In the Patriot Act, in the wake of the travesty of 9/11, a fundamental suspension of American civil liberties. That is what we are seeing here today. Mr. Speaker, you may wonder why so many of our friends across the aisle who care so deeply about the rule of law happen to be so desperate to pass this bill, after they are unleashing people who attacked police officers here on this Capitol into roaming our streets, who are publicly saying now they want to get a gun. Suddenly, these folks care about public safety? I don't think so. Look no further than the price tag of this bill, $83 billion. They know that it can't be paid for. They know that the capacity is not there. And you know what will be there? Private prison companies are going to get flooded with money, who give this money, no doubt. I want folks at home to look. Look at what members of Congress are invested in private prison companies who receive this kind of money, and look at the votes on this bill. It is atrocious that people are lining their pockets with private prison profits in the name of a horrific tragedy and the victim of a crime. It is shameful. It is absolutely shameful. And Mr. Speaker, I'll conclude with this. In a few months, there are members of Congress who voted for this bill who are going to pretend they didn't know about all the bad things that are going to happen because of it. So when a private prison camp opens in your town, when a dreamer...
Time has expired.
I yield the gentlelady an additional 30 seconds.
So when a private prison camp opens in your town, and they say, we didn't know this was going to happen, know that they did, and they voted for it. When a dreamer is disappeared from your classroom, when the President of the United States destroys what is left of the Constitution as he's announced in this attack on birthright citizenship, they will all say, we didn't know this was coming. And I want the American people to know that they did. This vote represents it. And with that, I yield back. Thank you very much.
Of course, Republicans want to pretend like they're the party of law and order. They want to pretend like they're keeping criminals off the streets as long as they have brown skin, as long as those criminals maybe look Hispanic. But those 1,600 mostly white people who stormed the Capitol, tried to tear apart our democracy and kill members of Congress, no, they're fine. They can get back on the streets. Hypocrisy at its most dangerous and finest from the Republican Party here and Donald Trump. Be sure to like this video to help it spread. Also leave your reflections in the comments below. Thanks for watching. My name is Brendan Plank with Reflect here on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next video.